Let's be real. Most capabilities decks are really, really bad. They're boring, they're bloated, and they're built entirely backwards. The format is outdated, the flow is confusing, and worst of all, they're focused more on the agency than on what the prospect actually wants to see. Your deck isn't a PDF version of your website, it's a sales tool. And right now, most of the agency decks I'm seeing aren't doing their job. But why should you listen to me? Well, I'm Lindsay Christian, and I run a six-figure agency dedicated exclusively to creating capabilities decks that close. I've designed decks for some of the biggest brands and most recognizable names in the world. And now I help agencies of all sizes land their dream clients by fixing the one part of their sales process that nobody's talking about, their capabilities deck. A solid agency capabilities deck is built to do one thing really well: move your prospects closer to a yes. In order for it to do that, it needs to build trust, prove value, and drive a decision. If it isn't doing that, it's not doing its job. So, in this video, I'm going to walk you through what most decks get wrong so you can spot the gaps in your own capabilities deck and start fixing them. And be sure to stick around until the end of this video because I'm going to give you 5 quick tips that you can use today to make your capabilities deck more persuasive and stand out from the competition. So, the first issue I see that agencies make over and over again is that their deck focuses on them and not the prospect. They talk about their origin story, their company values, maybe even their team structure. And while this information might be important to the prospect, it's not why the prospect is here, and it definitely shouldn't come first. When a prospect opens your capabilities deck, they're not there to join your agency fan club. They're asking one critical question: can you solve my problem? So if your first few slides are about you or your agency, you're forcing them to dig for relevance and essentially delaying that moment where they feel seen, understood, and heard and confident that you can help them. Instead, your deck should open with them, their goal, their challenge, and what their desired outcome is. Lead with a bold statement that immediately connects back to what they care about. Your agency's backstory, values, and mission can still be in the deck, but they belong towards the end, after you've demonstrated your relevance, credibility, and results. Because once they believe you can help them, they're way more inclined to want to learn about you, your agency, and what you stand for. So that brings us to issue number 2. A lot of the decks I see are structured more like a website than a sales tool. Content is all over the place, there's no direction, and there's no clear flow. But it's important to remember that a capabilities deck should be designed to guide your prospect towards the sale, not lead them all over the place. Now, a website is designed to be explored. It's open-ended with drop-downs, sidebars, and a ton of different content that allows the visitor to choose their own path. But a capabilities deck is very different. It's a guided journey. A great capabilities deck doesn't just tell your story, it builds a case. Slide by slide, it frames the problem, presents your solution, proves your results, and ends with one single frictionless next step. So if your deck feels more like your website, all information and no direction, it's not doing its job. It should feel way more like a well-rehearsed pitch than like a digital brochure. So the third way that I see capabilities decks really falling flat is simple. They all sound the same. There's no differentiation at all between one agency deck and the next. So from language like strategic thinking to creative execution to data-driven results, I've heard it all. And all of that language just sounds very generic and very boring. And it's the same language used by every agency. It doesn't tell your prospect anything about why they should specifically hire you. When a prospect is looking at your deck, they're asking one very specific question to themselves: why should they hire you over any other agency that offers these same services? And the only way that you can answer that question in your deck is with intentional, unmistakable differentiation. Differentiation is probably the most important thing you can think about and focus on for your agency, and it's crucial that you include it in your deck. And you have way more ways to stand out than you think. It could be through your process. Maybe you have a streamlined, ownable process, or maybe frameworks or tools that you use that are different from competitors in the space that can set you apart. It could be your clients or the types of clients you work with, your expertise in certain industries or in certain niches, or you can even differentiate through your results and the type of success you've been able to get. You know, real numbers, real results, real metrics, all of those stand out and really capture the attention of prospects because at the end of the day, they're buying those results. That's what they're paying you for if they choose to hire you. So when you clearly define what sets you apart and add proof to back that up, that's when your deck really starts to stand out. And a deck that stands out is ultimately what's going to get you hired. So I've talked about 3 key ways that I'm seeing capabilities decks fall flat, but what can you do to fix those things? So as promised, here are 5 quick fixes that you can implement today to make your capabilities deck stronger and stand out more. So the first one is to start with a dream outcome, not your logo. So I see tons of agencies make this mistake where their cover page is just a generic page that says, capabilities deck, and maybe has their logo or their contact information. And this is a huge missed opportunity. That cover page is valuable real estate that can set you apart from all the other decks in the pile. So, what I typically recommend is to include a dream outcome focused statement, something that gets the prospect to say, yes, I want that, so that they're more inclined to want to look at your deck, open your deck, and flip to the next page. And this works because it immediately hooks them because the cover page is about them and what they're looking for and not about you. So the next tip is to move your strongest case study much earlier in the deck. I see a lot of agencies group their case studies towards the back of the deck or maybe even the middle of the deck, and that's going to force your prospect to have to flip through all of the pages in your deck before they're really able to see the amazing results that you can get for them. So I like to move the strongest case study much earlier. Within the first 5 pages of the deck is usually what I recommend. And it works because it gets that credibility building going early, and it gets the prospect excited because they're seeing results, the types of results you can get from them way earlier in the deck. And that motivates them to keep wanting to read more. And so the next tip is to make your most powerful messages pop. Let's be real. Most people don't want to read. At best, they're scanning the text in a deck. Obviously, they're going to focus on imagery and videos first and then move to text. So what you want to do is take your core message on each slide. Maybe it's the first sentence or the most powerful headline, and make that in big, bold text on the slide so that it pops and it stands out. That's going to be the text that the prospect is reading first. That's going to be what they're focused on. And a pro tip is just to really look at all of the headlines in your deck and figure out, do they really capture what is on that individual slide, and B, do they really differentiate you? Is every headline on every page something that differentiates your agency and makes you stand out as an obvious choice? That's a great gut check just to see if your messaging is popping and if it's really going to resonate with the prospect as they move through your deck. So the next tip is to pair testimonials with results. This is another huge opportunity I see agencies miss all the time. I like to take the testimonial and put it right on the corresponding case study page. And this is super important because it humanizes that testimonial and the results you were able to get for that client. And it's super powerful because now the prospect is seeing another human being, somebody who was in their shoes, who chose to hire you and was thrilled with the result that they got. So it's a great way to just continue to build trust, build credibility, and make your case studies and the entire journey in your deck a lot stronger than your competition. And so the last tip you can use to skyrocket your conversions is to have one clear call to action at the end of your deck, and to also repeatedly use that call to action throughout the deck every 5 to 7 pages. So typically I see the closing page of capabilities decks will have, thank you, tons of information, contact information, the agency website, social links, too many options as far as the next step the prospect could potentially take. You want to have one clear next step for them to take, preferably a clickable link or button, something like book a call or fill out this form. So it's very clear what that next step is that you want the prospect to take. And then I like to drop this link in every 5 to 7 pages throughout the deck so that they're not forced to go all the way to the end of the deck to take the next step with you. But the key here is to just have one frictionless next step that's super clear, something they can click on, easily drop in their contact information. It goes to you. Maybe they're booking a slot on your calendar, but you just want it to be simple, easy, and clear as to what the next step is so that they're motivated to take action. So if your deck isn't closing clients, that's a sign, but it's also a huge opportunity. Implementing just one of these quick fixes can dramatically change how your deck performs. And if you want even more tips to build a capabilities deck that actually closes, check out this video. It's a full slide-by-slide breakdown of the exact structure I use to help agencies build standout pitch decks that consistently win new clients.